Hello, gorgeous people. And more gorgeous person.
Oh, hey, Liz. Fancy seeing you
hey!
here.
Oh, hi.
What a surprise. Hi, gorgeous creatures. Hey, Duncan. Hey, Katie. How are you all doing?
Yeah, not bad.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't actually. I'm at least a week behind on recordings, but I missed all your gorgeous faces, so I thought I'd drop in for pre-chat.
Me too, Duncan. I am also not caught up, but I am here to see faces that I love. So, hi.
Katie face appears. Hello, Katie.
You're so
face.
sideways, Liz.
Let me see if I can fix that. Oh, maybe I can. It's not
Hi,
going well.
everyone.
Hi, darling. Hey. How
Liz
you doing,
looks
chicken?
stunning whichever way up she is.
She is, yeah. It's very satisfactory.
How
Mara?
are you, Katie and Nick?
I just handed in my resignation.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I'm whooping based on Katie's actions. Is that the right emotional response?
Yeah. I mean, I've still got 3 months of notice to work, but I'm very happy to be starting to count down.
Hooray!
Congratulations.
There's another job coming. This is why he's handing his resignation.
What is the next job?
They're a company called WeFarm, and they are all about helping like smallholder farmers in like Africa and South America, what have you, be able to like be in contact with each other and work out how to solve their problems.
That is thrilling
That sounds amazing.
and really exciting. Also, like this is a big change for you, going from a big. I mean, like as a company, is it a different kind of company? Because I know your last job was a very different like ball game in terms of the product, but I don't know if it was a different ball game as a company to work for.
Yeah, I mean, it's a change of industry, but that's not unusual in software because, you know, software isn't an industry. It's just improving other industries. But it's, I guess it's from one startup to another. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. And is your role changing?
No, well, sort of at the minute, I've ended up being de facto head of tech at my company.
Mm-hmm.
And I am moving into back into a senior engineer role for a while, and then when they break out a new team, I'm kind of into be leading that team. So we'll see.
Congratulations!
Commiserations on not being able to do one of those really extravagant and angry, like I quit things, though, because that would have been really fun.
I mean, I almost am.
Really?
Are you doing it virtually?
I mean, I'm not gonna, throw a hissy fit, but I just like.
You're entitled to. They've broken your contract, so you can just say, "I'm leaving. Bye."
Oh, you should absolutely do that.
But that would be shitty for Jonas.
Yeah.
We don't want to be shitty to Jonas.
So bearing in mind that Jonas is on parental leave and I am the last developer at the company.
Shit.
So they're going down the pan fast,
Right. Okay. So it needs to be. And speaking of, Ashley Jonas, welcome. Hi.
Hi.
And Shan and Frankie.
Hi, everybody. Hey, everybody.
Shan! My feelings! Oh. You're topless, it's fantastic!
This is a talk.
Okay.
This is the right story time to come to. Hi.
Hello.
Kisses, kisses.
You would be a great puppy, Liz.
I
Indeed.
agree. I should like
Definitely.
that. That is
Mhm.
of the animals that exist, one I relate to hard is a puppy. So, not full time, but they actually, no, they pass out when they're like full, which is my other mood of excitement. I really would love a puppy right now. Hey, Bina, oh my God, your hair today.
Ina. You're
There's
like,
just so much of it these days.
it's so beautiful.
It's like mermaid hair.
It
like
is.
gold mermaid hair.
Mhm.
Just gorgeous.
Hi, Ariane. Hi, Ariane. Hi, Zach. Hey, Zach. Hey, Zach. Nice shirt.
It is a very nice shirt. That's an exemplary shirt.
Rumpled and whatnot.
Ah, family, Lisa, Jonas, Ash, hello.
Hello, les enfants. Hello, cutie pie. Also some excellent hair going on in that whole frame.
Hello.
Oh.
Can I tell you my distressing fact for the day that I learned courtesy of Liz's craft Zoom call?
What? What
Okay.
distressing fact?
Okay, so like dandelions and stuff where the stems have little hairs, little follicles on them. Apparently, the scientific term for those plants is pubescent.
For like peaches. I know. You know that delightful
Yeah.
feeling when you touch a soft fruit or a soft like the leaf of a plant that's that like silvery one that you think, oh, this is like a dog's ear. What a delightful experience I'm having. And it got ruined with the word pubescent.
Oh.
So it's a bad fact, but all in the name of science.
Yeah, you don't want
Which-
those hairs stuck in your teeth. Oh.
Well,
Science
does
was
that
this
mean? So this may be bad science, but I think I read once that one of Marilyn Monroe looked so incredible on camera was because she had quite a fuzzy face. She had she had quite a lot of kind of like peach,
downy.
peach down like a downy skin, and that is kind of one of the reasons that she looked so incredible, because that's a very flattering thing to have on camera that does all sorts of nice radiant things to the light. So does that mean that Marilyn Monroe had a pubescent face?
I'm going with yes. I'm fully going with yes, which brings it back round to a good thing, because if anything can redeem that word, it's Marilyn Monroe's face.
She's got such a gorgeous face.
In fact, little known fact, for when they were shooting Boulevard of Dreams, when she wasn't available on set and they needed to do a scene,
Just a
if the camera was over the shoulder, they'd just get an apricot and put it in a wig, hold it very close to the camera lens, and then
yeah, there was a big hullabaloo once because people mixed up the craft table and Marilyn Monroe's stunt doubles, and just went to town on all of these highly paid talented actor peaches.
I feel like the Muppets line needs coming in right now. It's like, Mother taught me never eat singing fruit.
That's maybe that's why Armie Hammer fucked that peach in Call Me by Your Name.
And
Maybe that. No, it's not Arnie. It's Timothy.
Is it Timothy who fucks the peach?
Timothy. Timothy is the one who's exploring his body. He is exploring fruit. He is having a joyous time discovering, the pleasures of the flesh
and
of the peach.
In Call Me by Your Name.
okay, that's fine. That's okay.
If you've not seen that film, I highly recommend as a film, just full stop. Recommend for that scene, but also the last scene is the best scene for just a shot of a face. Oh my god, phenomenal.
I downloaded it already, so it's on the list.
Katie.
Storytime.
Will that ever not be adorable? Answers from the floor. That will never not be adorable. Okay, okay, everybody. Okay, everybody. Now, what am I pressing? No, don't stop recording. Mute all. That's the thing to press. I'm a little bit boggled. Right. Right. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Eight. The driftwood door. I found Jane by following the rhythmic grind and thunk of a shovel in rocky earth. She worked steadily, digging in a low-lying spot in the centre of the island, alone except for a fetid, marshy smell and the whining drone of several million mosquitoes. And, of course, Mr. Theodore Havermeyer. He was nothing but a stained bundle of sheets, muddy white and vaguely larval. His hand, a colourless claw dotted with oozing punctures roughly the size of Bad's teeth, protruded from the wrapping. It cast a too large shadow in the late afternoon light. Couldn't we just, I don't know, toss him in the lake? Or leave him? The crunch of the shovel biting into the ground, the shush of dirt sliding off it. Jane did not look up at me, but a humourless smile appeared on her face. You think the Havermeyers of the world just disappear? You think no one comes looking? She shook her head and added comfortingly, It's good and wet here. He won't last long. This, I found, made me feel slightly ill. So I perched on a moss-eaten boulder and watched the crows gather along the pine boughs above us, like poorly behaved funeral attendees, cawing and gossiping. The splintery handle of the shovel appeared in my vision. I took it and made several subsequent discoveries. First, that digging is very hard, and I was still weak and sick feeling from escaping Brattleboro. Second, that human bodies are fairly large and require substantial holes. And third, that digging leaves plenty of room in your skull for thinking, even when sweat pricks your eyes and the skin of your palms stings in a raw, you already have blisters kind of way. My father didn't abandon me. He turned back for me. The thought was a small sun burning behind my eyes, too bright to look at safely. How long had I longed for some small proof of his love for me? But his love for my mother, his selfish sadness, had always been stronger. Until the last. Until it hadn't. And he turned away from the door he'd wanted for 17 years. So where is he? I wavered a little on that thought, pictured the mad scrawl of those final words. Run, January! Arcadia! Do not trust! And retreated. What did this final chapter tell me, really, that I hadn't already suspected? Well, first, that Mr. Locke had known full well that my father was door hunting, and had even hired him specifically to do so. I pictured the basement rooms of Locke House with their endless aisles of crates and cases, the rooms bristling with glass cases and neat labels. How many of those treasures were stolen from other worlds? How many of them were imbued with strange powers or uncanny magics? And how many had he sold or bartered away? I remembered the meeting I'd seen in London as a girl, the secret auction of valuable objects. There'd been society members present, I was sure. That ferrety red-haired man, at least. So I suppose the society too knew about my father and the doors and the things he stole. And it must be the society who stalked after him, haunting him, closing his doors. But why? If they wanted the treasures he stole for themselves. Or perhaps they wanted to hoard the treasures, then seal the doors against any further leakage. They'd like that. I'd spent enough time around rich and powerful men to know their affection for phrases like maintaining exclusivity and manufacturing demand through rarity. It made sense, almost. But who had closed my mother's door? That first door in the field all those years ago? And the mountaintop door? My father hadn't even been employed by Mr. Locke then. Had it been random misfortune? Or had the society been closing doors for far longer than my father's personal quest? They'd mentioned a founder once or twice in reverent tones. Perhaps the society was far older than it seemed. It didn't make sense either that they would harm their prize door hunter. But something had certainly prevented my father from coming back. Something had driven him to scrawl those last 3 lines. And now the society wanted me. They'll never stop looking for you, girl. There was a horrible, meaty crunch behind me. I turned to find Jane crouched over Havermeyer's body with a mallet and a clinical expression. A peeled wooden stake now protruded from the white bundle, roughly where his heart would be. Jane shrugged at me, just in case. I teetered for a moment between horror and humour, but I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was an oversized, tiptoeing towards hysteria kind of laugh. Jane's eyebrows rose, but then her head tilted back and she laughed alongside me. I heard a little of the same relief in her voice too, and it occurred to me that her attitude of cool nerve and confidence might not, in fact, be wholly true. You have read entirely too many penny dreadfuls, I admonished her. She shrugged again, unrepentant, and I went back to my digging. It felt easier somehow, as if something heavy had been perched on my shoulders and had flapped away at the sound of our laughter. I worked in silence for another minute or so, and then Jane began to speak. In my world, it's wisest to shoot anything strange or unusual you might meet in the forests. And that is why I almost killed your father the first time I saw him. My first shot went wide, though. Give me that if you aren't going to dig. My shovelfuls had grown scant and random. I scrabbled out of the hole and Jane took my place. Her voice matched the jab and toss rhythm of her digging. He began shouting and waving his arms, switching between a dozen or so languages. One of them was English. It had been a very long time since I'd heard English spoken aloud, and never by a dark-skinned, tattooed man who looked like a professor. So I did not shoot him. The hole was now well past Jane's waist, and every shovelful made a soupy, sucking sound. Gnats hovered like overeager dinner guests at its edges. I took him back to my camp, fed him, and we traded stories. He asked if I'd ever found another door in this world, or heard any stories about written words coming true. No, I answered, and his shoulders slumped. I felt I should apologize, but I did not know for what. Then he gave me a warning. The doors are closing behind me, he said. Someone is following me. He begged me to return to my native world with him. He told me he knew what it was like to be trapped in a world not your own, urged me to go back with him. I refused. Why? I perched at the edge of the hole, arms wrapped around my own knees. My borrowed skirt was already hopelessly muddied and stained, and for a disorientating moment I felt as if I'd been zipped backward in time when I was young and obstreperous and gleefully unkempt. Jane climbed out of the hole and perched beside me. Because the place you are born isn't necessarily the place you belong. I was born into a world that abandoned me, stole from me, rejected me. Is it so surprising I found a better one? She sighed, long and regretful. But I wanted to make one last trip through the door, just in case this man was correct and it was my only chance. Julian stayed camped at the foot of Mount Suswa while I went searching for more ammunition and for news of my sister. Jane's eyes flickered like lanterns in a gust of winter air, and the question, what happened to her, died in my throat. There was a little silence, and when she spoke again, her tone was brusque. I returned to Julian's camp. He asked me to stay again, and I laughed in his face. I'd seen what my home had become. White women watching me from train windows, poachers wearing foolish hats and posing for pictures beside animal carcasses, pot-bellied children begging in English, please sir, no. So Julian escorted me back to my ivory door to say goodbye. Except there was something strange waiting in the cave. Jane was staring into the grave, face taut. Piles of grey sticks bundled together and wires running out, and a faint fizzing sound. Your father yelled and shoved me away, and then everything came apart. An explosion that torched the backs of my arms and tossed both of us forward like matchsticks. I don't know if I lost consciousness, but it felt like I blinked and suddenly there was a man standing above me, wearing a tan British uniform. And behind him, where the cave should have been, was nothing but rubble and dust. His lips were moving, but something was wrong with my ears. Then he drew his pistol and pointed it at Julian. He should have pointed it at me. I was the one with a weapon, but he didn't. Jane's lip curled. When I die, I hope at least I don't look so damn surprised. I did not look at Havemeyer's body, did not think about the neatness of the hole that had appeared in his chest. I didn't even wait for his body to hit the ground. I threw myself at the mountainside, tearing away stones and earth. By the time Julian stopped me, my hands looked like bushmeat. He held me back and said, I'm sorry, until I understood. I was trapped here, in this world, forever. I'd never seen Jane cry, but I could feel a kind of rhythmic shuddering moving through her, like thunderclouds scudding across the bay. Neither of us spoke for a time, but simply sat in the cooling evening and listened to the hollow, mournful hooting of a loon across the lake. Well, in this world, you cannot be black-skinned and found near a dead white man in uniform. I used a skull to smash the body up and dragged him near the rubble, so there would be no bullet wound to scandalize a search party. And then we ran. We were on the train to Khartoum when your father asked me where I would go next. I told him I wanted to find another way in, a back door. And he smiled sadly at me. And I've been looking my whole life for another door to my home world, he told me. But I'll look for yours too, if you do something for me. And he asked me to come to a rich man's house in Vermont and protect his daughter. Another silent wave shook her. Her voice remained perfectly even. I kept my end of the bargain, but Julian didn't. I cleared my throat. He's not dead. I felt her go very still beside me, tense with hope. I finished his book. He found a door in Japan that led back to his own world, but he didn't go through it. He tried to come back for me. That small sun blazed again, briefly, then faltered. But he never made it, I guess. He says to tell you. I swallowed, tasting the shame of it on my tongue. He's sorry. Air hissed through the gap in Jane's teeth. He promised me. He promised. Her voice was strangled, almost swallowed by emotion. Bitterest betrayal, jealousy, and the sort of rage that leaves bodies in its wake. I flinched, and her eyes flicked toward me, then widened. Wait. January. You made a passage between the asylum and this cabin. Could you do it for me? Could you write me home? Her face shone with desperate hope, as if she expected me to produce a pen from my pocket and draw her door in the air between us, as if she were about to see her husband and wife again. She looked younger than I'd ever seen her. I found I couldn't look at her as I answered. No. My father's book says there are places where worlds rub against one another, like the branches of two trees, and that's where doors are. I don't think a door here in Vermont could ever reach all the way to your world. She made an impatient, dismissive sound. Fine, but if you went with me to Kenya, to my ivory door. Mutely, I lifted my bandaged left arm and held it level with her eyes. It shook and shivered after only a few seconds, and after a few more, I dropped it back to my side. Opening the way from the asylum to here almost killed me, I think, I told her softly. And that was a door within the same world. I don't know what it might take to reopen a door between two worlds, but I doubt I have it. Jane exhaled very slowly, staring at my hand where it lay against the earth. She didn't say anything. She stood abruptly, dusting her skirt and reaching for the shovel again. I'll finish here. Go see to Samuel. I fled, rather than see Jane cry. Both Bad and Samuel looked like they'd died and been reanimated by a sorcerer of questionable skill. Bad, dotted with dried blood, patchworked with bandages and stitches, had crammed himself in bed between Samuel and the wall, and now slept with his chin propped adoringly on Samuel's shoulder. Samuel's skin was an unhealthy, mushroomy colour between white and yellow, and his breathing beneath the quilt stuttered and shivered. His eyes opened to gummy slits when I perched on the bedside. Improbably, he smiled. Hello, January. Hello, Samuel. My return smile was a timid, tremulous thing. He extricated an arm and patted Bad's side. What did I tell you, hey? Bad is on your side? My smile sturdied. Yes. And, he said more softly, so am I. His eyes were steady, glowing with some sourceless warmth. Looking into them was like holding my hands above a banked fireplace in February. I looked away before I said or did something stupid. I'm sorry for what happened, for what Havermeyer did to you. Was my voice always that high-pitched? Samuel shrugged, as if being tortured and kidnapped were a tiresome inconvenience. But you will explain exactly what he was, of course, and what these doors are that so upset him, and how you got here without my daring rescue. He was sliding out from beneath the quilt as he spoke, arranging himself against the pillows as though every inch of him were bruised. Daring rescue? It was going to be spectacular, he sighed mournfully. A midnight raid, a rope through the window, a getaway on the white horses. Well, grey ponies. It would have been just like one of our story papers. All wasted. I laughed for the second time that evening. And then, haltingly, messily, fearing that Samuel would either laugh at me or pity me, I told him everything. I told him about the blue door and the overgrown field, about my father and mother and how neither of them was dead, or perhaps both of them were, about the New England Archaeological Society and the closing doors and the dying world. Mr. Locke keeping my father like a leashed hound and me like a caged bird. The written, and the way certain willful persons are able to rewrite existence. And then I told him about the silver coin that became a knife, and showed him the words I'd written in my own flesh. The skin beneath my bandages was pale and puckered with fresh scabs, like some injured lake creature that had washed ashore. Samuel touched the jagged curve of the J carved into my skin. You did not need rescuing then, it seems, he said, a wry twist in his smile. Stregas would rescue themselves in all of the stories. Stregas? Witches, he clarified. Oh. Sure, I'd been hoping for something a little more complimentary, but he believed me, without either a flicker of doubt. Maybe all those years of sneaking, pulpy monster stories when he was supposed to be manning the shop counter had rotted his brain, just like his mother said they would. Maybe he just trusted me. Samuel continued, speculatively. They always end up alone in the stories. Oh, witches, I mean. Living in the woods or mountains or locked in towers. I suppose it would take a brave man to love a witch, and men are mostly cowards. He looked directly at me as he finished, with a kind of raised chin boldness that said, I am not a coward. I found I couldn't say anything at all, or even think much. After a moment he smiled again, gently, and said, So these society people, they will keep looking for you, won't they? For the things you know and the things you can do. Yes, they will. Jane's voice came from behind me. She stood in the doorway, framed by the last red rays of sunlight, her mouth set in a grim line. Something about her reminded me of my father, and the way grief stooped his shoulders and carved lines on his face. Jane moved stiffly to the water bucket to rinse her dirt-grimed arms, saying, We need a plan and a place to hide. She patted herself dry. I suggest Arcadia, the name your father gave me for a world hidden on the southern coast of Maine. It is inhospitable and inaccessible, or so I am given to understand, which makes it an excellent place to disappear. I know the way. Jane's voice was perfectly even, as if a hostile and alien world was a perfectly ordinary destination, like the bank or the post office. But Surely we don't need to. January, she interrupted. We have no money, no place to live, no family. I am black in a nation that abhors blackness, foreign in a nation that abhors foreigners. And worst of all, we are memorable. An African woman and an in-between girl with wild hair and a scarred arm. She turned her hands palm up. If the society wants to find you, they will. And I doubt Mr. Havermeyer was the worst of them. Samuel shifted against the pillows. But you are forgetting. Miss January is not defenseless. She could write you anything you pleased, it seems to me. A fortress, a door to Timbuktu or Mars. An unfortunate accident for Mr. Locke. He sounded rather hopeful about the last possibility. He had growled in a very bad-like manner when I told him about Brattleboro. A sour smile twisted Jane's face. Her powers are not unlimited, I am told. I felt a prickle of defensiveness, doused in shame. No. It came out slightly choked sounding. My father says word working comes at a cost. I can't just rip things up and stick them back together however I like. I snuck a sidelong look at Samuel, my voice lowering. I'm not much of a witch, I'm afraid. He twitched his hand so that it lay very near to mine on the blanket, our fingertips almost touching. Good, he whispered. I'm not that brave. Jane cleared her throat rather markedly. Now, getting there will be challenging. We have 200 miles to cross without being recognized or followed, and not much money to do it with. I am afraid. She smiled, a tight, chill smile. Miss Scala will have to become accustomed to a rather different standard of living. That stung. I have travelled a bit, you know. I had luggage with my name stamped on little brass plates. My passport looked like a well-thumbed paperback novel. Jane laughed. It wasn't a very cheerful sound. And in all your travels, have you ever spent a single night in a bed you made yourself? Cooked a single meal? Have you ever even seen a second-class ticket? I didn't say anything, damningly, but merely glared. We'll be sleeping in the woods and begging rides, so adjust your expectations accordingly. I couldn't think of an especially clever reply, so I switched subjects. I'm not convinced we should even go to this Arcadia place. My father disappeared in Japan, if you recall, and we ought to go look for him at least. But Jane was shaking her head tiredly. They'll be expecting that above all. Maybe someday, after some time has passed, when it's safer. To hell with safer. Maybe we could go to Mr. Locke for help. Samuel and Jane both emitted sounds somewhere between disbelief and outrage. I forged on, shoulders squared. I know, but look, I don't think he wanted me or my father hurt or dead. He just wanted to get a little richer and have a few more rare objects to stick in display cases. He might not even know about the society closing the doors, or maybe he doesn't care. And he loved me, I think. At least a little. He could help us hide, lend us some money, get us to Japan. I trailed off. Jane's eyes filled with something tarry and oozing. Pity. Surprising how much pity can hurt. You'd like to go off adventuring and save your father, like a fairy tale hero. I understand. But you are young and penniless and homeless, and you've never really seen the ugly side of the world. It would swallow you whole, January. Beside me, Samuel said, and if Mr. Locke was trying to protect you before, he has done a very bad job so far. I think you should run. I went mute, feeling my whole future twist and warp dizzyingly beneath my feet. I had been waiting for my life to snap back to normal, as if everything that had happened since my father's disappearance were a movie, and soon the card would say, "The end," and the lights would buzz back to life, and I'd find myself safely back at Locke House, rereading The Rover Boys on Land and Sea. But all that was permanently in the past, like a dragonfly preserved in amber. Follow Jane. All right, I whispered, and tried not to feel like I was 7 again, eternally running away. We'll go to Arcadia. And will you stay there with me? Or go home? She flinched. I have no home. I met her eyes and found that the pity in them had curdled into something ragged and despairing. It made me think of ancient ruins or decaying tapestries, of things that have lost the thread of themselves. She teetered for a moment on the edge of saying something further, recriminations or rebukes or regrets, then turned and left the cabin with her back very straight. Samuel and I were quiet in her absence. My thoughts were a flock of drunk birds, ricocheting between despair. Would we both be homeless forever? Would I spend my life running? And a childish, bubbling excitement. Arcadia, adventure, escape. And the distracting warmth of Samuel's hand still lying beside mine on the quilt. He cleared his throat and said, not very casually, I intend to go with you, if you allow it. What? You can't. Leave your family, your home, your profession? It's far too dangerous. I was never going to be a good grocer, he interrupted mildly. Even my mother admits it. I have always wanted something else, something bigger. Another world would do. I gave an exasperated half laugh. I don't even know where we're going or for how long. My future is all tangled and messy, and you can't sign up for all that out of goodness or pity or January. His voice had gone lower and more urgent, which made my heart do a funny da-dump against my ribs. I do not offer out of pity. I think you know this. I looked away, out the cabin window at the bluing evening, but it didn't matter. I could still feel the heat of his gaze against my cheek. The banked coals had sparked and caught flame. Maybe, he said slowly, maybe I did not make myself clear before, when I said I was on your side. I meant also that I would like to be at your side, to go with you into every door and danger, to run with you into your tangled up future. And a distant part of me was gratified to note that his voice had gone wobbly and strained. For always, if you like. Time, an unreliable, fractious creature since the asylum, now absented itself entirely from the proceedings. It left the two of us floating, weightless, like a pair of dust motes suspended in afternoon sunlight. I found myself thinking, of no particular reason, of my father. Of the way he'd looked as he walked away from me all those times, shoulders bent and head bowed, dusty coat hanging loose on his frame. Then I thought of Mr. Locke, the warmth of his hand on my shoulder, the jovial boom of his laugh, the pity in his eyes as he'd watched me drugged and dragged from his house. In my life, I'd learned that the people you love will leave you. They will abandon you, disappoint you, betray you, lock you away, and in the end you will be alone, again and always. But Samuel hadn't, had he? When I was a child, trapped in Lock House with no one but Wilder for company, he'd slipped me story papers and brought me my dearest friend. When I was a madwoman, locked in an asylum without hope or help, he'd brought me a key. And now, when I was a runaway pursued by monsters and mysteries, he was offering me himself. For always. I felt the lure of that offer like a hook behind my heart. To be not alone, to be loved, to have that warm presence always at my shoulder. I stared hungrily into Samuel's face, wondering if it was a particularly handsome one, and realizing I could no longer tell. It was only his eyes I saw, ember bright, unwavering. It would be so easy to say yes. But I hesitated. My father had written about true love like it was gravity, something that simply existed, invisible and inescapable. Was it true love that made my breath catch and my heart seize? Or was I merely scared and lonely, reeling from exhaustion, clinging to Samuel like a drowning woman offered a boy? Samuel was watching my face, and whatever he saw made him swallow. I've offended you. Forgive me. His smile curdled with embarrassment. It is only an offer. To consider. No, it's not. I started the sentence without knowing where it was going, half terrified of where it might end. But then, with a sense of timing that bordered on the divine, Jane returned. She had an armload of mossy firewood and a closed expression, like a sutured wound. She saw us and paused, her eyebrows lifting in a my, what have I interrupted sort of expression, but proceeded to the stove without comment. Bless her. After a minute or two, during which Samuel and I both exhaled and shifted our hands farther apart, Jane said mildly, "We should sleep early tonight. We leave in the morning." "Of course." Samuel's voice was perfectly even. He levered himself off the bed, face paling with the effort, and ducked his head graciously toward me. "Oh no, you don't have to. I can sleep on the floor." He feigned deafness, spreading a few mousy-smelling blankets in the corner and crawling into them. He rolled his face to the cabin wall, shoulders curving inward. Good night, Jane. January. He said my name carefully, as if it were barbed. I climbed into bed beside Bad and lay stiff and aching, too tired to sleep. My eyelids felt hinged and hot. My arm throbbed. Jane propped herself in the rocking chair in front of the stove, with Mr. Locke's revolver in her lap. Faint coal light glowed from the grate, drawing the planes of her face in soft orange. She wore her grief more openly now that she was unobserved. It was the same expression I'd seen so many times on my father's face, when he paused in his writing and stared out the grey windows as if wishing he could sprout wings and dive through them. Was theirs the only future I could look forward to? Was I doomed to grim survival in a world that wasn't my own? Grieving, unmoored, terribly alone? Bad gave one of those soft dog yawns and stretched beside me. Well, not entirely alone, at least. I fell asleep with my face pressed into the sunshine smell of his fur. Travelling with Jane across New England was nothing at all like travelling with Mr. Locke, except that both of them had similarly clear ideas about who was in charge. Jane issued orders and instructions with the calm confidence of someone used to seeing them followed, and I wondered if she'd led her own bands of hunters back in her adopted world, and how hard it had been for her to impersonate a maid in this one. She woke Samuel and me in the pre-dawn gloom, and we were halfway across the lake before the first honeyed line of sunlight crept above the horizon. The four of us crammed into the Zapia's rowboat rather than risk the ferry and its curious eyes, and took turns rowing toward the dull gaslight glow of the shore. Rowing, I discovered, is quite as difficult as shoveling dirt. By the time the hull scuffed against coarse sand, my palms had progressed past blistered and were approaching bloodied, and Samuel was moving like someone several decades older than his actual age. Jane looked perfectly fine, except for the grave dirt and blood still staining her skirt. I should have predicted the way people would scurry away from us as we straggled into town, clutching their hats and muttering. We made an unsettling gang. An armed black woman, a sickly young man, a glaring dog, and an odd-coloured girl with ill-fitting clothes and no shoes. I tried to ask one of the scurrying women for directions to the nearest train station, but Jane stamped on my bare foot. Well, excuse me, but I thought you said we'd take the train. Jane sighed at me. Yes, but as we will not be purchasing tickets, it's best not to draw attention to ourselves. She jerked her head at the railway snaking east out of town. Follow me. She walked on without waiting for assent. Samuel and I looked at one another for almost the first time since our conversation the night before. He raised his brows, eyes sparkling with humour, and made a grand "after you" bow. Jane led us to a small, mostly empty train yard, where we slunk aboard a flat rail car labelled Montpellier Lumber Company, and waited. Within the hour we were hurtling east, deafened by the roar and rattle of the rails, coated in coal smoke and dust, grinning like children or madmen. Bad's tongue lolled in the wind. The next 2 days are blurred in my memory, lost in a haze of heat and aching feet and the ever-present fear that there were eyes on the back of my neck, hunting me. I remember Jane's voice, cool and certain. A night spent curled in an overgrown field with the sky hanging above like a spangled quilt. Greasy fish sandwiches bought from a roadside store, a ride from a farmer hauling blueberries to Concord in a mule-drawn cart, and another from a chatty postal carrier at the end of his route. And I remember Jane lifting her face to the breeze as we limped down an unnamed road just over the Maine state line. "Smell that?" she asked. I did. Brine and cold stone and fish bones. The ocean. We followed the road until it turned to smooth pebbles and salt-stunted pines, our footsteps muted in the moonlight. Jane seemed to be navigating from my father's instructions rather than any map or memory of her own, She muttered to herself, occasionally reaching out to touch an odd-shaped rock or squinting up at the stars. The rhythmic rushing of the sea drew closer. We rounded a dense wall of pines, scrabbled down a short bluff, and there it was. I'd been to the seaside dozens of times. I'd strolled along the beaches of southern France and sipped lemonade on the coast of Antigua. I'd taken steamers across the Atlantic and watched the neat parting of the sea before us. Even storms felt small and distant from inside a hotel or a steel hull. I'd thought of the ocean as something pleasant and pretty, a slightly bigger version of my own familiar lake. But standing there on the rock ledge, with waves crashing beneath me and the vastness of the Atlantic roiling like the black contents of a witch's cauldron, it seemed to be something else entirely. Something wild, something secretive, something that might swallow you whole. Jane was picking her way down a lichen-slick path, hugging the cliffside. Samuel and I followed, Bad scrabbling ahead of us. My lungs felt strangely constricted, my pulse shuddering in anticipation. A door. A real, actual door. The first I'd seen since I was a half-feral child running through the fields. A door my father had left hidden and open just for me. Even now, when he was trapped or caged or dead on the other side of the planet, he had not abandoned me. Not entirely. The thought warmed me, like a candle flame held safe against the whipping sea wind. Jane had disappeared into a low, damp crevice. I leaned forward eagerly, but Jane re-emerged, tugging a jangled pile of planks and rotten twine behind her. She sighed heavily. Well, it was too much to hope it would last in this weather, I suppose. We might be able to float the supplies alongside us with whatever's left. And then she began, methodically and quite unselfconsciously, to undress. Jane, where's the door? She did not answer, but merely pointed out to sea. I followed her finger and saw a lumpy grey smudge on the horizon, with patches of bare rock gleaming silver in the starlight. An island? But surely we can't... You're not swimming to it. Inaccessible. Inhospitable. Just as advertised, I believe. Her tone was dry. She was already splashing into the sea, her underthings shining white, her limbs vanishing into the dark. Bad dove joyfully after her. I turned to Samuel in search of an ally and found him unbuttoning his shirt. Bet you the last loaf of bread I can beat you, he murmured, as if we were children playing in the lake rather than weary, desperate adults standing on the coast of a cold sea, running away from God knew what. I laughed helplessly. I caught the bright curve of his answering smile, glimpsed the paleness of his chest, and then he was wading after Jane and Bad. There was nothing to do but follow him.
It's a nice stopping point.
Yay! How y'all doing?
Samuel is so cute.
He's lovely.
He's so cute.
He's so wholesome.
Oh, he made me melt.
No. Jonas would have just said yes straight away.
Oh,
Oh no. Oh no. I wasn't like
Oh, sweetie, sweet pea. It's okay, Ash. You're still cuter than Samuel.
I really love the way Jane is written. Like, particularly the way she bristles. It's so good.
I like that everybody's facial expressions were curdling in this one.
Yes.
Can anyone do that? Bracken, make your face curdle. That's really good.
Is it when you keep the smile, but then you let your eyes go dead?
No, I think you need to look slightly disgusted for it because it's curdling, right? So it
Yeah.
goes from very happy to just like slight changes and make it go.
Oh,
That's so good.
I think it's these muscles here actually.
Yeah.
For
How
me.
do you have such good control over them? I don't know. What do you do to make your, what are you thinking about to make your face do that?
I'm doing autistic masking.
okay. Okay, I
You're
have an
stumping
idea
yourself.
for curdling and see if this works. Okay, on 3, everybody smile, and then reach your tongue up to the top of your palate.
That just makes your chin
Yeah,
very,
no, that's-
very nice looking. That's all it does.
It's
Yeah.
also made the inside of my mouth feel quite peculiar. Blah, blah, blah. But yeah, Jane is a goddamn badass, and I love her. Yeah, I really like that she's sort of prickly. I think is too diminutive a term, but she's not just like a badass, but also really like nurturing and caring, and like she's hard as fucking nails, and that includes not necessarily always being the most like touchy-feely.
It's really refreshing having a like female caregiver who isn't mom TM. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I really like that it's like Samuel who is all like, who's being like the sweet, lovely, like, you know, oh, are you okay? I'm here for you. And Jane is like, this is what we have to do. I'm in charge. Like, you're all gonna get us killed. Just do what I say.
Forget, how old is Jane supposed to be?
36.
26 or 36?
36.
36. Okay, yeah.
She was
How do you know
14
that?
when she went into the world of the leopard women, and then she stayed there for 22 years.
You are amazing at this.
It's a trick.
How old is Samuel meant to be? I've lost track of that.
Like the same age as.
I think
January.
isn't he 19? I think she's 17 and he's 19. I think.
You are sending your nature.
I'll be honest with Samuel, I'm just picturing Harry Styles in like a Mario costume.
What the fuck?
I'm just like, okay, like Dreamboat Boy and Italian, and that's like the lazy shorthand my brain has come up with.
Oh, Rory, is Harry Styles your dream boy?
Well,
That's so cute.
No, I'm going for like what do teenage girls like? What's the youth into?
Frankie, how would a young Stanley Tucci be for Samuel?
Stanley Tucci's only get better with age. Stanley Tucci is at his peak now. I don't
Yeah,
think
that's true.
cool.
That's true. Yeah, I don't think anyone in this novel is necessarily Stanley Tucci, or anyone we've met yet. But who can Stanley Tucci play out of all of Storytime?
I was going to say he could be Mr. Locke in this, if he could be an antagonist.
Mr. Bennett.
Oh no, surely not.
He can be pretty acidic when he wants.
No, but you don't get to see him blatantly sexual. This is the one we need. We need blatantly sexual Stanley Tucci.
Yes. Thank you, Bracken. Thank you, Bracken.
I would absolutely cast Stanley Tucci as the dragon.
Oh yeah, totally.
Ooh.
Or as Chandrash. I feel like you do a really good Chandrash.
Ooh,
yeah.
I could see that. What about what's the what's the name of the bro in Wizard of Earthsea?
Oh shit.
Astariel. Vetch.
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 What about Vetch?
The clockmaker in the Night Circus.
Yes.
Cedric Teason, yeah.
Could Tucci pull off a Vines?
Ooh, could he pull off a veterinary?
He could.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's too put together to be a Vimes, you know.
Yeah.
But he's
Yeah.
got
I think
really good fingers.
How about the circus boat master in Grace Keepers?
I don't know. I think Red Gold's too bombastic for like Stanley Tucci. I think is more. What about the Fire Eater?
I was thinking because he did that sort of role in Hunger Games.
Oh, I haven't seen Hunger Games.
Oh.
Should we watch Hunger Games?
I don't know. I think he's a bit fake in Hunger Games.
I mean, that's the point.
I mean, they're meant to.
But that's a character.
Television presenter, so yes.
Basically, Piers Morgan with a perm.
What about Stanley Tucci for Elizabeth Bennet?
Stanley Tucci is Lydia.
Just slutting it up. I love
He would
it.
be so into that too.
He would be an amazing Lydia. He would love that.
Gorgeous. Hurling himself in the window.
Full of soldiers.
Wait, Stanley Tucci as all of the Bennett sisters.
Every
Yes.
single one of them.
Even Mary.
Yeah.
Just
What about a kind of Being John Malkovich style, like Stanley Tucci as every character in Pride and Prejudice? Stanley Tucci as
George,
Lady
I think we brought
Catherine.
it.
Ah, Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
He would be the best Lady Catherine.
Oh man.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Stanley.
I would quite like to see his Mr. Collins too.
Oh god, no, he's
Like-
too hot for that.
That's the thing playing against.
Oh.
Interesting.
Stanley Tucci as Miss Honey, I would also very much watch.
Well, that works.
Yes. Oh.
I mean, all of this talk is just making me want to make a Negroni. Like,
Do it.
that's what I've taken away from the Stanley Tucci fandom thing is like, it's my favorite cocktail anyway. So
Maybe
I think
ever a
you
bad
should make
time for a Negroni?
And we should make a
Well-
letter writing campaign to Stanley
This-
Tucci to ask him nicely if he would do a Pride and Prejudice reading as all the characters.
Like
Yes.
a person show of Pride and Prejudice, just Stanley Tucci wall to wall.
I think he'd be
Stanley
up for
Tucci's all the way down.
Well, this has been fairly light on kind of snacks and refreshments so far. So maybe for the final night, it can just be Stanley Tucci themed and everyone could be on the Negronis.
And draw
Negronis
swirly
are never a
tattoos
bad
on
idea.
What's that, my love?
Negronis are never a bad idea.
Yes.
Was that me?
Yeah. That was you. That was you.
And I was saying that we could draw some tattoos for costumes and such, draw some swirls on ourselves.
Yeah. Like with letters about all what we are and stuff.
We can all build boats. Like
Yeah.
it was a diversity.
Yes. Zach can build his boat again. That was so good. That was so fucking good. We could all build doors. Maybe I'll
Katie, when you
Maybe-
just said that about the like tattoos and stuff, I looked down at my arm.
It's a knife.
Oh, I thought you meant like you looked down at your arm and you were like, "Fuck, I'm covered in tattoos."
Lord,
Who did this?
oh,
How did this happen?
Yeah. Be honest, guys. Is there something on my head? Just about here.
Alternative costume idea, dress as your dream door.
Ooh. What would that even entail?
The door itself, or what's through the door? Or like
Ooh.
Stanley
Yeah.
Tucci as the door.
Maybe
what's through the door?
maybe we could like dress as what an inhabitant or a resident of our ideal world through a door. I'm definitely.
Or
gonna
you
do
can make your face a
Frankie.
door with the nose, a little doorknob. That'd be pretty cute too. But your way works.
A lyric, you're so cute. You're so fucking cute.
I just want to see someone dress up as a door.
Be the door you want to see in the world.
Was our change?
What a message for the catch-up crew. Be the door you want to see in the world.
That's a great message for the catch-up crew and for all of us.
May none of your doors turn into rubble.
On that note, let's say goodbye to the catch-up crew. Let's do it. Let's do it. Catch-up crew. Catch-up crew. Be the door you want to see in the world. Goodbye. Goodbye, catch-up crew. We love you. Goodbye.